Good morning, good afternoon, and to some of you, good evening, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast, Saturday Free Show. We call this the Saturday Free Show because we do not stop at an hour and go into the patron bonus champagne room. Everybody gets a pass to the champagne room, if you will. That being said, we have a great show tonight. Thank you for the patrons that joined us last night for movie night, where we watched one of my favorite films, Hollywood Shuffle, and then had a fun discussion afterwards. I do like movie night. I feel like we should do it a little more often. And I feel like we should add a horror movie night. As I do love the horror movies. And I would love to talk horror movies with you guys. So if you guys want to do a horror movie night as well, in addition to, drop a comment and say, yes, Jason, let's do horror movie night. If I get 10 yeses, I will add another night to the already busy schedule that we have here at This is Revolution. Speaking of busy schedules, let me bring in my homie, my co-host, my dog, who I hope is finished with the book and working on his book review. Please welcome the man of the Mau Mau Hour, the Pascal Robert.
Peace and greetings to the chat. Peace and greetings to the audience. Peace and greetings, Jason Miles. I am reading Taiwo's book. I'm in chapter 1, a fast introduction. I'm going nice and slow. Do you have a deadline that you want me to meet?
How is it? How is the first chapter?
It's very status quo. It's rad lib speak, and I'm realizing that rad lib is the new term of art for people who posture left but are really liberal. And it's very much rad lib kind of
you learn
race talk that we're not, we don't really, get too much into here. But
no.
Listen, Jackie Luqman is here, and it's reason to celebrate. So I don't want to dampen the day with a book that I'm not looking forward to reading anyway, because Jackie Luqman is here. And Jackie Luqman is one of my. Everyone who knows, whenever Jackie Luqman is on the show, I'm happy because she's one of my favorite media personalities. I love her coverage on Sputnik, on Black Power Media, wherever she from the Real News. I believe that she brings a very, very down to earth, really grassroots analytical framework to her work, and I'm always glad when we get her on.
Well, speaking of another person who we love his work, he has wonderful hair. He is the only one of us with hair, and that is why I secretly hate him. Hate with capital H, because he's got hair. Please welcome Marcus of the Left Flank Vets.
I was actually planning to cut off my locks and make a wig for you, but now I'm not going to.
Make a wish, kid.
that was gonna be your birthday present, But now you said mean things. If you could though, which if you're gonna do the horror movie night, at some point in time, you're gonna have to watch Morbius.
Oh, with Jared Leto?
Yeah. It's so bad. Like I want to watch it again.
A lot of young people that are probably around your age and maybe slightly older got wind to Morbius and Blade around the same time. The Spider-Man animated series in the 90s ran a story arc one of the seasons with Blade fighting Morbius.
Yeah.
So and he is a bit of an anti-hero character. I don't know how they're doing him in the universe. I've heard
It's
different people tell me different things about Morbius. I will say this on a good Disney note. I watched the first 2 episodes of Kenobi last
how's
night.
that? Yeah.
That is amazing. And for a 44-year-old man that grew up loving Star Wars, knowing that I can watch a Boba Fett series and a Obi-Wan series and still see Darth Vader doing new stuff into my 40s is like a dream come true.
See, I feel like a lot of these shows just tap into the nostalgia shit for people who grew up with Star Wars.
Oh, that's all it is.
Yeah.
So it's
Like
yeah.
the Top Gun movie, which I
Yeah,
did see.
Dan Larson, who's a huge Top Gun fan, like he's got Top Gun erections all over the place with the new Top Gun movie.
Yeah.
There's so much nostalgia because we're an audience that actually a lot of us have some money.
I would
we
be pissed
buy
off
action
though
figures
if they try and go woke with the new Top Gun and make the volleyball scene straight. That'd be just too much.
Oh my God, really?
That'd be too much.
The volleyball scene. Watching it as an adult man, I was like, I can't believe this was in the film.
All right, let's bring in Jackie.
She is the woman that now has us on the radar as Russian disinformation. That is true. Someone sent me a message last night that said when this show went up, it said, warning, this show may be sponsored by Russian oligarchs, something like that.
What?
Yeah, it's all Jackie's fault. Because I tried to be the nice guy and put links into her work. And you wanted to bring in a chocolatey Russian woman that is sponsored by Sputnik.
The state-sanctioned media.
Please welcome comrade Jackie Luqman.
I know, right? That sounds like some kind of 70s kind of like chocolatey Russian, chocolatey Russian, chocolatey Russian.
Let's get up Patrice Russian to do Jackie Luqman's chocolatey Russian song. Jackie,
I'm clearly hooked up with the wrong oligarchs because these cheap bastards. They're not really.
Those don't look like oligarch curtains behind you.
Oligarch curtains.
Not so much. They're not. I'm not able to stay at the 5-star Ocean City resort hotel. I'm at the Days Inn. So yeah, I must be hooked up with the oligarchs. Yeah, I must be hooked up with the oligarchs at the low end of the Russian hierarchy.
Jackie just elbowed 2 small white children for the last 2 pieces of bacon. She dropped the people's elbow on an 8-year-old. You better not look at that apple fritter. You better not look at it.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can you reach that? I sure can.
Okay, I'm gonna stop messing with you guys.
So Jacqueline,
why did he just run off?
Wow, Jason just cut out. Jacqueline, you have been doing some traveling as of late to countries that are, let's just say, on the State Department radar, not for some good things. But we don't care what's on the State Department radar because we actually like these countries. But first of all, can you share with us what was the cause of your trip to both Cuba and Venezuela?
So I went to Venezuela as a member of the delegation to attend their summit against fascism, International Summit Against Fascism. Venezuela, I think, has this event I think they have it every so often, if not every year. But this year was the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-backed coup that was failed and overturned by the people in Venezuela. So this summit in Venezuela was all about the ongoing fight against fascism in Venezuela, the involvement, the interference of the U.S. government in Venezuela, always trying to overthrow their governments, and really gave in-depth information about that coup in 2000, that we, of course, never heard here. So that was the Venezuela trip. And the Cuba trip was, I went with the national, what is it, NNOC? I'm blanking on it right now. National something on Cuba, their annual May Day brigade. Every year for the past 15 years, they do a brigade. A bunch of people go to Cuba for 2 weeks, and this brigade for the NNOC is a work brigade. So they work in alongside Cubans in like gardens. There's some things you cannot say. Um, and then they take tours of the medical facilities, industrial facilities, that kind of stuff. See how Cuban workers, how Cuban workers work, and then they experience May Day in Cuba. So those were the reasons I went to those countries.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I would assume that this is the first
Hello,
time you
hello,
were
y'all there?
visiting both countries. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I had never been to either country, and interestingly enough, um, my late husband and I had planned to we planned to do these things next year, along with going to Colombia, which I also did last year. But things working out the way they did, I was able to go this year, and I got to tell you, it was it's one thing to listen to the State Department lies about these countries, um, and know that they're not true, right? It's another thing entirely to go to these countries and see the depth of the lies of the US State Department, just how absolutely amoral the policies and the posture of the US toward these countries really, really are. I mean, you have to see it for yourself to understand just how evil the US policies are. And I don't use that word lightly. I don't toss that word around. When you go to countries like Venezuela and Cuba and you see the people and you see what the government is trying to do for their people, what the government is doing for their people that we don't get here, that we can't have here. And then you realize that everything this government is saying about these countries and their leaders is just the most evil thing in the world, because they want to destroy what those governments have done for their people. They want to destroy, this government wants to destroy the socialist revolutions in these countries. So that it was visiting those countries left an indelible mark on me, I think.
Well, the first question I wanted to ask you is about Cuba. Is that when you got off the plane, I would
Mhm.
like you to share your experience of of the revolutionary history of what Cuba represents to socialist revolutionary movements in the world. When do you get a sense when you are in the country that history becomes part of just the atmosphere that you're in? When do you feel the connection to that?
Man, it's wild, because when I get off the plane in Cuba, it's like it is like it's kind of like an environment that I'm not like used to. We in this country are very used to things being state of the art, and everything is quote unquote orderly, and there's kind of a level of chaos almost to getting into the airport and getting your luggage. And then you see all of the Cuban people who are bringing with them like these massive, massive packages of goods that they're bringing back to their families, right? In Cuba. And that's like the first clue um, that this is a different kind of situation, and I mean everybody. I don't mean like one or two people. I mean everybody who was Cuban in that airport had an enormous package that they were bringing back, not just one package, two or three packages. So that was like the first kind of clue that there is something different about the way people exist in Cuba, right? And that wasn't like a good or a bad thing. That was just something that I really noticed. And then the first encounter I had with someone with a Cuban, which was very interesting, was the facility where we were staying, the camp where we were staying. I was supposed to fly in. My flight was supposed to come in at another terminal. It was on my itinerary that I was supposed to come in at another terminal. For some reason, my flight came in at a different terminal. So they didn't know that I was there. I didn't know that I needed an internet card. Your American cell phone there is no cell phone carrier that will work in Cuba. So
Wow.
when you go to Cuba, yes, I don't care what they say, there is no cell phone.
Oh shit! They cut off the Wi-Fi.
When you go to Cuba, you need with that will work in Cuba. And when you get to the airport, you need to purchase an internet card, because internet is spotty in Cuba. Internet is owned and controlled by the government. And because of the sanctions that the United States puts on the government of Cuba, they can't upgrade their equipment and have great Wi-Fi and internet. That's not how it works. So you have to buy a Wi-Fi card when you get to the airport. So I'm trying to call the facility, the camp. My phone's not working. I'm able to get like half an hour free Wi-Fi in the airport. I get in touch with somebody at the camp and tell them nobody's here to pick me up. A cab driver comes up to me, and I know like this much Spanish, un poquito, muy un poquito. Cab driver comes up to me. He's speaking Spanish. I'm like, lo siento, lo siento. No hablas,
And
mucho
Cuban
español.
Spanish
It's
is
like,
very fast.
okay. Yeah, and he's like, oh, so he speaks English, and he said, where are you going? I'm like, I don't even know. I'm supposed to be at this camp. I think there was a mix-up, so I explained everything to him, and okay, let me take you to the main terminal and get Wi-Fi so you can call some people. And I'm just like, look, I am by myself. I am in the country. I do not speak much of the language. And this is out of a horror movie. This is like a scene from a horror movie, right? This is when, the silly American tourists gets in the cab and is never seen again. And right? But that's not what happened at all. Not at all. Dude was like, let me get you to the terminal so you can get internet. Contact your people. I'll wait with you until somebody comes and gets you. And if so he takes me to the other terminal. I get a little bit of Wi-Fi. I get in touch with somebody. There's still some confusion. He's like, look, I tell you what, I can take you into Havana so you can get to a hotel. And then it will be easier for them to get you there. And I'm like, look, I don't know if this is a good idea. I was like, listen, I'm not going to leave you here. He's like, he said, we're Cubans. We don't do that.
Oh.
And I'm like, what the hell? Okay. So they finally did get someone there for me. But this guy, he took me to,
she brought the Cuban Wi-Fi back.
I said, how much do I owe you? And he's just like, 20 American. Now look, yeah, that was a lot of money in pesos, but I was going to give him anyway. I was going to give him 20 anyway. But just the fact that here I am, an American in a country where I speak the language, I don't know anybody, I can't really connect with my people, and this random strange man is just like, I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to make sure that somebody comes and pick you up. I will be here with you until your people come get you. To me, that was the kind of solidarity and an expression of the kind of revolutionary ideology that came out of what Fidel instilled in the Cuban people. And it just blew my mind. So I get to the camp and I tell them what happened and everything, and they're really sorry. And they're like, yeah, this is common. They said this is very common in Cuba. It's, we don't, treat people special because they're American. This is our act of internationalism. This is how we express internationalism. And that's not unusual at all.
Wow.
So
Incredible.
it was like, damn, man, and according to the US, it's like, run by a dictator and it's the most dangerous place in the world. But I was more safe than if I had, wound up in a ritzy neighborhood in the US somewhere, and some random person called the cops on me. You know what I'm saying? So that was like the first, I think, expression. That was like the first inclination that I got that, like, Cuba is different, and in a really good way.
How did you get down there? Because someone asked, because we do have these kind of difficulties in terms of sanctions. How exactly did you fly down, get visas and passports and all that stuff? What was the process
Yeah,
of that?
yeah. Obviously you have to have your passport, but when you go with the brigades, and I recommend that for people who are going to Cuba for the first time, that you go with one of the brigades. There are several. There's the NNOC. There's the Venceremos Brigade. There are the IFCO Pastors for Peace Brigade. There are several that you can go with. I recommend that you go with the brigade the first time, because you get this very intense, full immersion experience of Cuban life, of Cuban workers, and of Cuban culture. They do an amazing job of really cramming a whole lot of information. Um, into that 2 weeks. And then visas, the organization that you are going on the brigade with will provide you with a visa. You obviously have to have your passport. They'll take care of your visa. They will make your travel arrangements. And so you have to fly to Miami or Fort Lauderdale, and then you fly from Fort Lauderdale to Miami to Havana, or one of the, usually it's Havana. And that's how it has to be done. And you get I think you get a letter from the Cuban embassy, I believe, giving you your travel justification, or it's a part of your visa, and you have to take all of that with you, because you need to show that when you're coming back. They'll look at it when you go, but when you're coming back is into the United States is when you, of course, when you may have a problem. That's how that. Now the next time I go, and I'm definitely back, I don't know if I will go with another brigade or if I will just contact the travel agency, which is called Marizul, um, and see how they do it. But I would highly suggest, the first time everybody goes to Cuba is to go with a brigade.
Mark, you have
And
some questions?
yeah, I because as far as like actually like there's some diplomatic changes with Cuba and Venezuela. Well, I wouldn't say changes, but there were some, I guess some talks with Venezuela about gas, and I think Biden had passed something that had rolled back some of the Trump increased, or like sanctions on top of the embargo. So I guess, yeah, my question would be like, maybe we could start with Cuba and then like we'll put Venezuela on the back burner.
Mhm.
Yeah, how I guess, how do the people, I guess, feel about not only, I guess, like the like American, the embargo, but also to like Americans in general, because you're talking about this great sense of solidarity and internationalism. Did you run up in any, I guess, ill will that I think would be understandable?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that, as soon as they found out you're an American, that, Cubans and Venezuelans would be like, that you, get the side eye, but not at all. And this is where the level of political education um, is very different and extremely high in Cuba and Venezuela compared to here in the United States. Because everybody I met in Cuba expressed the fact that they have no problem with the American people. They can't stand the American government. They are clear. Everybody in Cuba that I met are clear that the problems they have with food shortages and fuel shortages and all of that kind of thing, all of their economic difficulties, 98% of it is the fault of the United States government and the blockade against Cuba. There might be, some internal issues that people have with their government, as is true with every government in every country, right? But most people in Cuba understand that it's the United States government and a blockade against Cuba that is the reason for a shortage in sugar, a shortage in cooking oil, a shortage in flour. And you'll see this, when you go to the grocery stores in Cuba and people are standing online to get in. They're regulating the amount of people who get into the store. And I think that's part of a code policy more than anything else. But then when you go in to see that some of the shelves are empty, except for alcohol, which is interesting. But um, yeah, so that does exist. But in Cuba, understand that is because of the U.S. embargo against the country. So people in Cuba, I don't care who the people, from the people who are like um, the public works guys who are working on cutting the grass in public spaces, literally with machetes and sickles, because the country can't import equipment like, lawnmowers, weed trimmers, the kind of shit that we're used to. They understand they have to do it that way because the US government and their blockade will not let their government import this information in this equipment. The people in the countryside who have small farms and larger farms that are a part of the like national organization of peasant farmers that literally helps feed the country. They till their fields with oxen and horses, right? And they understand that they have to do that because their government is not allowed to import farm equipment because of the US blockade against their country. And interestingly enough, a byproduct and an unintended consequence of the blockade has been this incredible ingenuity and self-reliance that the Cuban people have had to develop in order to survive. So you see that in the way that these small farmers, I mean, everybody has livestock, everybody has either horses or oxen. You see people with tilled farms, like literally almost on almost vertical sides of hillsides. That they're places that a farm equipment could have never gotten to safely, but they're able to farm in places where an oxen can go, where horses can go. So, you know, people in Cuba they're extremely proud of their revolution, and they have every right to be, because they defeated the imperialist US and its allies. They kicked them the fuck out of their country because they did not want the US and its allies and the mob. Don't forget that the mob, the US mafia, was very involved in the exploitation of and the oppression of Cuban people. So these people are very proud that they defeated US imperialism. And when you learn the history of that revolution as you go throughout the country, and this is where being on the brigade will be very helpful, because they take you some of the um, different kind of programs. Different brigades go to different places. The brigade I was on went to all of the historical monuments. We went to the Che Guevara Memorial. We went to Saint Iphigenia Cemetery, where Jose Marti's tomb is, mausoleum is, Fidel Castro's mausoleum is, and the tomb for the martyrs of the revolution, and the tomb for those who gave their lives in the struggle for internationalism. That is incredibly important, because in Cuba, people are very keen on international solidarity. They are very keen on building relationships with people in other countries who are also targets of US imperialism, so that we can all defeat US imperialism. And I'm not talking about this is something that comes just from the politicians. It does, and it did very explicitly, but it also comes from regular folks in Cuba. We were hosted by one of the community committees for the defense of revolution, one of the neighborhood block parties. And there was this elderly man who, for some odd reason, really, really needed to talk to me. He invites me into his daughter's house, and then people open their homes and they invite us into their homes, and we sit down and we talk and we eat and we drink and we, all this kind of stuff. So he shows us, he's showing me all of his medals and all of his um, accolades, his awards that he received during fighting in the revolution. And he showed me his medals fighting in Angola. And he showed me his uniform when he fought in Algiers. And then he showed me a picture of his late wife. And he said, obviously in Spanish, "This is my wife. This is my love. She's away, but she was mulatto." And at first, as an American, it's like, well, why do you need to tell the Black girl that you were married to a mulatto, right? But the point he was making was that, and he said, Cubans and Africans are united. We owe Africans so much. So Africans and Cubans are united. And that just blew my mind, where we think of as we don't think of Cuba as African at all, but Cuba is a Black ass country. There's a whole bunch of Africans in Cuba. And then we do not think of the Cuban Revolution as having anything to do really with Africa and the liberation of Africa. But if you know history, you understand that Fidel and also Russia had several African countries fight against their former colonial masters for their liberation. And they continue that solidarity today. So you go to Saint Iphigenia Cemetery, behind Fidel's tomb, this a monument to the martyrs who gave their lives in the struggle for internationalism. Most of those people died in the campaigns in Africa. And internationalism was incredibly important to Fidel Castro. So these kinds of ideologies that that we saw reflected in the monuments in Cuba, we also saw reflected in the Cuban people, everyday folks. And it was, I mean, it was like being in Cuba is like, feel like being more free than I've anywhere else that I've been.
We got a little frozen with the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, and I think that to that point, it does. I think put into focus how impressive not only some of the things that Cuba was able to do domestically, but even the fact that they were able to support liberation efforts, in Africa and across the world. But then also too, some that we haven't hit on yet is their medical deployments for healthcare workers. The fact that Ukrainians who were suffering from all types of nuclear damage, from what's that damn site that fucking Chernobyl. Yeah. And just countless lists of deployments. I mean, like Venezuela, Brazil, all over
they
the
built
place.
that airport or they helped build that airport in
South Africa,
Grenada.
Oh,
that later was the BS reason that Reagan wanted to invade.
Yeah, we lost you for a second due to Wi-Fi issues, Jackie. But we're glad you're black. Well,
you're glad you're
black.
Yeah, we are glad you're black.
Oh my God!
If you're white, we would not be white. We'd be
glad
like, nope, nope.
Yeah, sorry, it's real choppy on my end.
The reason that was on my mind is that I wanted to ask about the Afro-Cuban cultural mixture that exists in the country, because I'm so familiar from the Haitian context, the influences of Haitian and Afro-Cuban culture in terms of Haitian folkloric culture, and there's a lot of similarities. I was wondering if you got a chance to see any of the Afro-Cuban cultural manifestations, whether music, jazz, art, Santeria, any of the above, any of those things that were some things that struck out for you while you were there.
Well, we didn't. The brigade I was on didn't go deep into the particularly Afro-Cuban part exposure to Cuba, but when we went to Santiago de Cuba, which is very important in the history of Cuban Revolution, we were met with dancers who I understood were welcoming us in the Yoruba Orisha Elegua welcome us, and I'm standing there and I'm seeing all of these Black people doing this dance that I know very well is Yoruba and very African, and and I'm telling people, oh, the drummers who are singing and drumming, they are singing that Elegua well, because I kept hearing them say Elegua. And it was like, oh, they're welcoming us. The Orishas are welcoming us. This is very Afro Cuban. And some folks, because everybody on the brigade is not of the same political. That's the people on the brigades can be a mixed bag. And like, oh, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, well, I do. This is real African. These are Afro-Cubans, and that one of the dancers was actually a representation of Elegua, who is dancing and welcoming people. So that struck me, and that was really cool. And then we met the provincial government of Santiago de Cuba, which includes a member of the provincial government, pro-Cuban woman, And she was really her. I'm blanking on her name right now, but she's really fantastic. I had to got a chance to talk to her for just a couple of minutes at a reception that they gave us when they welcomed us, and and she said, you know, I really hope that you come back. And I said, so how difficult would it be for me to relate here?
Wow.
And she was actually really tickled. And she said, look into a bird visa when you're ready to retire. And I got 5 years. Okay. So we did get to experience that. We got to experience there is a revolutionary square, a smaller revolutionary square in Santiago de Cuba, that is a replica of the big in Havana, which is very nice. And there is there's an incredible monument to what is his name? Marcia. I cannot remember his name right now, but he is the Afro-Cuban who led hundreds, if not thousands, of Afro-Cubans who were peasant farmers in the rebellion against Spain in the 1800s, and defeated many of the Spanish forces, and all on horseback. They rode not over 900 miles, fighting and defeating the Spanish forces on horseback. And there were mostly, if not all, Afro-Cuban forces. There's a big ass monument to, his name is escaping me right now, clearly Afro-Cuban in the middle of Cuba. So this government completely erases the connection of Africans in this country to Africans in Cuba, to Africans all over the world. And that's intentional. That's intentional. When you talk to regular Cubans, most of them, I mean, look, there are some right-wing gusanos in Cuba who hate Castro and who are in league with the US government. Excuse me, absolutely. But most Cubans are very proud of the history of Afro-Cubans and their revolution. It's not like this separate part of the history that they have to, it's not like a footnote, oh yeah, Cubans did this. It's like, no, the Cubans did this, and this, and then we see that this person Afro-Cuban, and they're like, well, yeah. So it is a very feel about history of this country, what Black people did throughout that history here, as opposed to talking about the history of Cuba and seeing the clear presence of Afro-Cubans all throughout that history in Cuba.
Does in the visit you went on, did they? And you mentioned that you'd met one of the local leaders, and from my understanding, like the Cuban, obviously the governmental structure is way different than how it is in the United States. Did you get to kind of like go through and like they teach you how those structures work, and kind of how people are actually engaged, with the political process, throughout?
Yeah. The basic how do I want to put this? The most immediately involved in the governmental process or the political process is through the committees for the defense of revolution. And they are literally these neighborhood organizations that were developed after the Bay of Pigs invasion, after the Cuba out the imperialists one more time. And the government and the people said, you know what? We need to nip the subversive activities of the imperialists in the bud in our community. So they developed these communities for defense of the revolution. Now, what the U.S. government will say is that they're spy networks, right? They're spy networks that the
That sounds
Cuban
like
government
authoritarianism.
implemented to spy on people. Oh my God, it's so authoritarian. But here's the thing, though. These so-called spy networks, they have developed their neighborhood resources so that they establish schools in the neighborhoods, not just one school, many schools in the neighborhoods. They establish clinics. They establish stores and food pantries. They do neighborhood development, and the neighborhoods elect the leaders of the CDRs. And then the CDRs feed into a regional structure. And then the regional structure feeds into a like
Oh, yeah. Got a little bit of a.
president of Cuba actually can't do anything like Diaz-Canel can't just do anything he wants to do without the approval of the party. That's not what happens in Cuba at all. And if the people in the CDRs want the government to do something, they are engaged in their CDR political process to submit their requests, demands, or whatever directly from CDR right up to the head of the party, the president of Cuba. So the political process in Cuba is more democratic than anything we have ever had in this country.
So let's actually move on to Venezuela. What was your experience in Venezuela in terms of what you witnessed over there? Now, we understand that Venezuela is dealing with also difficult economic situation, political pressure from sanctions as well, a political situation that's somewhat in flux. How would you describe the situation over there?
Was kind of a little bit different because we were a part of because we were a delegation that were, specifically for, this conference. And, they tried to, here's the thing. Venezuela is, I think, I won't say that their position is more precarious politically than Cuba's is, but Venezuela does have they did have that U.S. propped up fake president, right? That the United States, Juan Guaido, that the United States kept and continues to try to make legitimate, but the situation that the United States has created with their proxy war in Ukraine has forced them to really back off dealing with him at all. So now they're being forced to deal with the actual president of Venezuela. So it was another one of those situations where we got this full immersion into the history and the culture of the country in Venezuela. I just happened to miss the evening. I missed my flight. We did get to see the neighborhood where Hugo Chavez is buried, his tomb, and the museum there in that neighborhood. It is a predominantly poor neighborhood, very unlike the way people in this country honor their heroes, where there's this exclusive area where people put. No, Chavez was a man of the people, so his tomb and the museum to his life and the revolution that he led, the Bolivarian Revolution, is in the neighborhood among the people that he fought for. And they are very, very proud of that legacy, of that revolution. You can walk up to particularly older Venezuelans and ask them how they feel about Hugo Chavez, and these people will cry. They love that man so much. They still revere him and honor him for what he did in elevating marginalized people, indigenous people, Afro-Venezuelans, the elderly and the poor, bringing them out of the margins into the mainstream of Venezuelan society, which is absolutely U.S. government wanted, which is why they tried to coup him in 2002. So you didn't get a whole lot of experience in the neighborhoods in Venezuela, and I think that was just because that's just how the thing was set up. But they did give you a lot of experience into the history and the culture. You got to see a lot of that. You got to learn way more about that coup in 2002, that stuff that I never knew, like the fact that Chavez was imprisoned, and he thinks they think that they were about to execute him. And the coup in 2002 is actually, they call it the first media coup of the 20th century, because what happened was news channels are saying their new president, and then for the rest of the day, all the news channels in Venezuela are showing cartoons. Venezuela had been pretty much secreted somewhere, and with the Venezuelan people, rewrote the Constitution of Venezuela. So the U.S. was pissed off at that. The right wing in Venezuela, so they kidnapped him, tried to implement this coup government. They got the media involved. Well, and people are like, what are you talking about? We have a new government. They're watching the news the next day, like, what do you mean there's a new government? What's going on? Chavez is in some jail cell somewhere, and a young Venezuelan soldier asked him that he was tasked with guarding Chavez, and he asked him, because the media accounts said that Chavez had renounced the presidency. The soldier asked Chavez, "Is it true that you renounced the presidency?" And Chavez said, "No, I would never do that." So the soldier said to Chavez, "The people need to know this. So this is what I think you should do. I think you should write a letter saying that you have not renounced the presidency. Sign it and put it in this trash can over here, because nobody's going to look in the trash can. And I'll get the letter and I will take it to whoever you want me to give it to." And that is how, and that blew my mind, because I never knew that about that. That's how the former Attorney General
come on.
The thing, Hugo Chavez has.
You might have
Hugo
to start
Chavez
that over,
has
Jackie. Your
renounced.
internet.
But instead, he has this letter written by Chavez, and he says to the media that has already decided that they're in on this coup, he says one sentence: Hugo Chavez has not renounced. And that was all it for the people in Venezuela to flood the streets to demand the return of Hugo Chavez. So that part of a popular revolution, of popular communication, of people overturning and repelling an imperialist coup is incredibly important to the history of Venezuela to their ongoing struggles against U.S. imperialism and to what we're
Ooh.
Yeah, Jackie's having some internet problems.
I'm like trying to will the internet to work right now. Like, God,
While we're dealing with internet problems with Jackie, I guess we got bombarded with trolls from that are from, I don't know where they're from, but they're patriotic socialist trolls. And
the internet.
they're talking shit about Pascal, loving white people, and
When did that happen?
What's like the thing to do is like you're supposed to just hate white people, you know, like, is that, like
hey man, these fools are clowns and they don't like being called Nazis and fascists because they're like, but that's what white people are. I'm like,
all the top patriotic socialists are white.
If you do anything Caleb Malpin does, I'm not gonna call you a Fed because that's giving you way too much props. You're just an idiot. Like we need to stop calling people Feds because that means they're smart.
That means
These
they
are
got
idiots.
like they're working for the government.
Yeah,
No,
you're just
like
you like the symbolism and it pisses off your parents, and you're probably a child. So
stars and bars, that rhymes. Why give that up?
I'm making public appearances real soon. You're gonna log off and log back in, Jackie? Okay, Jackie's gonna log off and log back in.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out and come back in, see if that
And
helps.
I bet you they won't show up.
I don't know.
I bet you they won't show up.
No, come on.
There's some suckers.
Although, going with what Jackie's saying, and even like I think it's like some of the stuff that's going on. Someone mentioned in the chat earlier with the Summit of the Americas.
Mhm.
And there's been a good amount of pushback. You know, I think Mexico is probably, you know, like one of the like the most, you know, or at least politically substantial country to say like, but we're not going to this, you know, quote unquote Summit of the Americas if, you know, like a third of South American countries can't show up because, you know, they're on the US fucking naughty list. And especially going to bat for Cuba and Venezuela. So I don't know. I think that's like an interesting, you know, development, you know, kind of where, yeah, you know, there's seems a lot more solidarity between Central and South American states. And I think
Crispy reconnection now. Look at her. Crispy.
There you go.
Crispy. Can you hear us, Jackie? Now she ain't got no sound.
Oh, still? Yeah,
Can
I
you
can
hear us?
sort of hear you.
Okay. Yes, Jason is challenging the cats to duels.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm challenging cats to duels because I think these motherfuckers is punks. So talk that shit. This ain't, look, the internet, just so y'all know, this ain't real life. You can talk all the shit you want on the internet. It just proves how fake a lot of that shit is. I'm gonna be in real life 3D. No shit.
I hadn't even paid any attention to what there were some trolls over there.
Yeah,
Y'all had some trolls in here.
Some clowns was talking about Pascal and they want to talk mess, and I was like, look, man, check this out, homeboy.
Yeah, and yeah, before someone catches Jason's hands in 4K, Jackie, it seems like, and like that's like kind of just, you know, amazing where even from that story you're telling about how the revolution started, or yeah, and also within Cuba, there is a just more deep-rooted connection, right? These are people-driven movements, and like the idea that this is some type of top-down authoritarian, whether, you know, of like, Fidel is, I mean, yeah, what, just strong arming? It's like, oh, you have a problem, like, let's go in the back and wrestle, I'll whoop your ass, and now you do what I said. You know, they would have failed. They would have failed miserably. They would have been, we would have no idea who these people were. They would have failed miserably had it not been for the support of the people. And it goes to this day because they're still, even after they went back, you're like, so they tried to make some deals with the oil, and just like a week ago, they're now mentioning, oh, we're trying to still talk with Juan Guaido.
Yeah.
And so I guess, yeah, it's like, if you could even just talk about like more of the current situations that's going on, because it's like, it's just plain as day, you know, in their last election, the socialists like won I think all but one of their regions, huge international community that's watching the elections, and still they're like, oh well, we don't know. Like, someone needs to come here and watch our elections. Like,
That's the truth. The wild thing is that people about the Venezuelan political system, it is again more democratic than than ours. Venezuelans can vote in a referendum to get rid of the politicians they voted for if they don't like what they're doing in
at
the
any point in
middle of
time,
their
right?
term. And
Right?
at
Yeah.
any point in time, in the middle of their term, every Venezuelan politician is subject to a referendum recall if the people are unhappy with their with what they're doing. That's all of them, all the time. So what we don't get that. We don't get that at all.
And that's like, oh, just vote them out with the gerrymandered districts, with the suppression of votes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you talking about? Just vote.
So the situation in Venezuela right now is that because the US government has created their little proxy war in Ukraine and has tried to sanction Russia, but of course, and weaken Russia, but of course that's bad because now the ruble is almost as valuable as the dollar. And Russians, because of the interference of the US government in the economy of post-Soviet Russia, Russians have learned how to be self-reliant too. So they're like, okay, fine. You gonna close McDonald's? Cool. We got Uncle Vanya. You gonna, this American company is gonna close it. Cool. We've got this other way of getting what we need. This is the kind of again, it's the self-reliance and the ingenuity of people in countries that have been the targets of US imperialism. That's why the sanctions that the US government has imposed against Russia aren't working, because the Russian people are like, oh, we've seen this before. So they're just, they're fine. So what has happened is, instead, what's happened is the US has suffered because of the sanctions, because now the oil that we used to get, that this country used to get from Europe through Russia, not getting now. That's why your gas prices are so high. That's part of the reason. They really don't have to be that high. That's just the gas companies just rip you off. So the US government, Biden is like, I got to do something. I got to do something to get some more oil. Oh, I know. I have to go to Venezuela. So he went to Venezuela with sort of his hat in hand, kind of, and he lifted sanctions on a former oil executive who just happens to be, I think this is delicious, the relative of President Maduro's wife. So not only does Biden have to deal with the actual president of Venezuela, but he had to lift sanctions on his cousin them. So Maduro and his wife are sitting up in Miraflores, which is the presidential palace in Venezuela, like, yeah, lift something, because we know that we have something that you need. So they lifted those sanctions because this person is connected with Chevron, which is the only U.S. company that has operations in Venezuela, right? So I don't know how that is. I haven't done the research into the background into why that is, but this sanction had to be lifted in order for the U.S. government to deal with this Chevron company in Venezuela. So this is not a lifting of the other hundreds of sanctions against Venezuela. It may provide the Venezuelan government with another stream of revenue to bolster the socialist programs that are paid for by the revenue from PDVSA, which is the Venezuelan state-owned oil company, right? So this is not something that the Biden administration wanted to do. They did not want to do this, but they understand that politically, and because the Summit of the Americas is such an absolute fantastic disaster, because the Biden administration refused to invite Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. So now the other global South countries and the Caribbean nations are like, guess what? We're not coming either. If you are going to diss our countrymen in our region, then we're not coming to your summit of the United States of America. This is supposed to be the summit of the Americas, so all the Americas should come. So the Biden administration lifting this one sanction, and it literally is one sanction, on this to deal with Chevron in Venezuela is beneficial for the Venezuelan people, but it won't last long. So I think Nicolas Maduro is going to get as much for as long as he can, and good for him. But also it is an informal kind of way of the Biden administration that Nicolas Maduro is the duly elected president of Venezuela, because Juan Guaido ain't making this deal, right?
And then he's like, if you could get it from Juan Guaido, if you could get the oil from Juan Guaido, they would have. Get the oil from your boy.
Exactly. But he don't run shit. He don't run. And when you talk to Venezuelan people, they are like, we hate that dude. We like, right. What of all the people the United States have propped up, that dude, so people in Venezuela are very clear about who their president is. They are very clear, like people in Cuba, they are very clear about understanding that imperialism is the problem. They recognize that they have a right wing in their country that has privatized a lot of the other industry, like agriculture and manufacturing. Yeah, the private sector, the capitalists in Venezuela have and the people in Venezuela are very, very clear about this, but they know very well that their main enemy, the primary contradiction for them, is U.S. imperialism. Then with the U.S. lifting remittance limits and travel restrictions for family members of Cubans, that's also a part of this. The U.S. government having to make some concessions to Venezuela and Cuba because the U.S. government's backed itself into a corner with their proxy war in Ukraine and with their shitty policy trying to exclude these countries from the Summit of the Americas. That's backfiring spectacularly.
So what it seems like is that the current realpolitik about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine has forced the United States to do a scramble for allies, if you will. In that
absolutely.
That the normal situation in which people who were considered to be outside the framework of the sphere of influence that can be trusted to deal with the United States, the realpolitik is forcing them to have to search for people they can deal with because they need resources to shore up the gap that's being made by their inability to get those resources from Russia or surrounding countries, whether it be oil or wheat or corn or a variety of other commodities that are coming out of the Russia-Ukraine sphere. The United States now is having to try to recalibrate itself to deal with these countries that normally were considered outside of the proper normative functioning of diplomacy, because all the allies are short now in terms of who we can get these resources from.
Yeah, absolutely true. And the interesting thing is that every other country sees, the idea that the United States keeps saying things like, oh, the world condemns Russia. No, the world does not. The world does not condemn Russia. There are over 150 countries in the world. Most of those countries are not condemning Russia. Most of those countries are condemning the United States. So what the United States has done with this proxy war in Ukraine against Russia is not to turn the world against Russia. The United States has caused the march toward multipolarity to speed up. That's what's happening right now. That's what's going on when you see countries in the global south and countries in the Caribbean publicly coming out and saying, basically, fuck the US and their Summit of the Americas. If Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua are not invited, we ain't coming. Kiss our asses. I mean, that is the result of countries that have been the targets of US imperialism for decades, realizing that the balance of power in the world is changing, has changed.
On top of that, too,
and they are pushing the world closer and closer to multipolarity and isolating the US. That's what's really happening.
Because even recently, Mexico got in some hot water because they've been nationalizing their oil and gas industry, which I can only assume is either them just knowing actually how to utilize resources to benefit their own people, but then I can't assume that wasn't influenced from the especially Venezuela, who even with the sanctions and just the similar sanction of Cuba, is that with a culture, with a apparatus that's directed towards the people, you can actually do a lot, even if the world powers are trying to shit on you. I just gotta agree that there is a huge, I think, a lot more shift than most people are realizing when it comes to South America, South and Central America.
Well, I mean, part of the thing that's really fascinating too, right, is that even if regardless of what your position are in terms of the Russia-Ukraine thing, what seems to be developing is that there are countries that are banking on the rise of multipolarity simply because they like the idea of having two factions to negotiate with. In other words, it just seems like it's a better business to be able to negotiate on terms in which there are two hegemonic forces that you can try to get a better deal from, as opposed to dealing in a situation where you only have one. So I think that what we're finding is that regardless of what foreign powers are feeling in terms of their actual sympathies on the ground regarding the Russia-Ukraine situation, some of them are seeing the possibility of a multipolar world as it's frankly good for business. What do you think about that, Marcus?
No, I think it's 100%. I think that's how China's been able to develop their Belt and Road Initiative. Once they're able to offer a different opportunity other than a U.S. military base and a capitalist class coming in to divide up your resources and territories, people took it. And countries all over the world took that better option. Having more is only going to be beneficial, and that's where too, of I got to take a country like Mexico, where a lot of times,
leaving the homeland out of this.
No, I'm proud. I'm saying it's good now because definitely it's especially with as far as NAFTA worked and everything like that of just, I guess, putting a reserve army of labor down in Mexico, and how they're developing now. The U.S. has been fucking up, and now I think with China, with and all these other countries that are being able to develop on their own, it's going to keep pushing, right? There's going to be a lot of countries that might outwardly say, "Oh yeah, we're still rah rah USA, world power shit," but they're slowly backing away. You know, it's like Homer into the into the brush. Because the time's ticking on U.S. hegemony.
Well, I think we have a little bit of an internet problem with our guest Jackie Luqman, which is a shame because we were having some really great conversation, but we've had a pretty long
Jackie's on
conversation
fire
right now.
Yeah. Sorry, I was helping the mods moderate the chat.
Yeah,
Got insane for a second.
You were being Pascal on Facebook.
I was being Pascal on Facebook, but in real life, no, I was. And people had questions about fascism and Marx and Dugan, and
well, that's a digression from where we are today. But listen, Jackie, I guess she had to take a break.
I think her shit is the poor woman's Wi-Fi is out.
Yeah, that days in.
Well, we had a really good conversation thus far. Jason, you was feeling spotty. You want to wrap it up at this juncture?
Yeah, that would be great, man. If we could. I'm sorry we couldn't go longer. Sorry that Jackie's Wi-Fi went out. She just disappeared because Kuba snapped her like Thanos. And
well,
just
I'll say like I was looking into like one of these trips, you know, it's like one of these groups for like the trips to Cuba and everything like that. And I don't know. I think like I think it's important. You know, it's like I appreciate Jackie taking the time of to go. But also I think it should be one of the pushes, right? To try and see if people can go and actually experience and see and learn, because I think that's if there's any movement that's going to be able to develop, being able to take what you have, and the very small scant resources that any budding movement would have, have, and actually make good with it, right? Being able to take not a lot and develop medical programs, health or educational programs. There's examples out there, right? And we should go take a look.
There we go.
True. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Again, sorry. Wait a minute. I think, did Jackie come back? Oh, she came back and then she went away again. Damn. Man,
I'll call her.
Yeah, they hit her with the Havana syndrome gun because she's speaking too much truth.
Thank you guys. And we will be back Tuesday with Jen Pan, where we'll be talking about intersectionality.
Don't forget.
All right.
What about Stefan on sublation?
Oh, thank you. Let me read that script. Also 8 p.m. UK time. Stefan will be doing a stream on Sublation on the Twitch channel, on the Sublation Media Twitch channel. So don't forget to check that out. And we are out.